On today's show, the newest debate amongst NBA draft experts, Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller, who should go number 2 overall in this year's NBA draft. Scoot Henderson no longer the consensus to go number 2 overall behind Victor Wembanyama. What makes Brandon Miller a more enticing prospect than Scoot Henderson? All that and more coming right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Joel Embiid to have more than 28.5 points? What about Giannis Antetokounmpo to have more than 8.5 rebounds? How about Chris Paul to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Jason Tatum to have less than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, you name it. They've got you covered over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They're safe. They offer incredibly fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On NBA, Big Board, Rafael Barlowe, who you can follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On NBA, Big Board. And Rafael, it's that time of year. It's that wonderful time of year. Well, wonderful for me, with the Rockets and whatnot. NBA regular season is winding down. NBA draft talk is heating up. And for months, it was. Scoot Henderson was the consensus number 2 overall pick behind French big man Victor Wembanyama. But over this last week or so, it seems like the narrative has kind of shifted to where there's a significant chance it looks like that Brandon Miller could go number 2 instead. So let's start first with, where do you currently have Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller ranked, and what are some of the reasons for the sudden change at the top of people's draft boards over this last week or so?
Well, I have Brandon Miller number 2, and I had been leaning towards moving him to number 2 since January, and I have Scoot number 3. Right now, everyone is kind of starting to, I guess, follow the leader in a sense. And I know back in January, I had mentioned it in a tweet, and I got absolutely blasted on Twitter for even considering it. I mean, it went on for like 24 hours. I even wrote an article saying, like, for example, a team like Detroit, it does not make sense for a team like Detroit to draft Scoot Henderson. So, the conventional theory is best player available. But my personal theory is, even if you draft the best player available and you don't have him in the best situation available, or the best situation for the player, then are you really getting the best out of him? So, but that was just my theory that I had in January. I've officially moved Brandon Miller to number 2 a couple weeks ago. And I think the difference is, well, one, Miller he's just played phenomenal. 40% from 3, 7 attempts per game. Scoot got off to a really, really hot start. But as the season went on, he dealt with some injuries like a nasal fracture and a concussion. But as the season went on, he just was not as dominant as I would have expected. We've seen some guys put up some huge numbers in the G League. But the last month or so, he was around 14, 15, 16 points per game. I think he only had one 20-point game after like mid-January.
Wow. Okay. Well, some compelling arguments here. And I do wonder, the biggest knock that I keep hearing about Scoot Henderson is just, some concerns with the shot, right? Are the concerns legit about Scoot Henderson's shot at this point in your eyes?
Yeah, right now. But I think he's going to improve. He's a really good mid-range shooter. I think the biggest concern is that he didn't make the jump that people thought he would make. And it's the same for the Thompson twins, who are expected to go in the top half of the lottery. Brandon Miller is a really good shooter. He is a year older, but he's a really good shooter. Like I said, 40% from 3. But I think the biggest concern with Scoot is, again, he did not make the huge jump. And then he got off to like a crazy start. I want to say 4 out of his first 5 games, he had over 25 points. And then after that, he ended up finishing the season averaging about 17. So he definitely cooled off.
Okay, so we know that you've got Miller 2, Scoot number 3 right now. What's the argument if you're one of those teams that still believes in Scoot Henderson at number 2 on draft day? You're still taking him number 2 regardless.
Yeah, but he's a point guard. He's athletic. He's going to have the ball in his hands, has a very incredible pace. He's a good decision maker, has all the physical tools, big hands. I think the mid-range shot is really good. And I mean, it was really good last year. And I think the 3-point shooting wasn't as high because he was making the adjustment from high school to the NBA 3-point line, which everyone's going to make that have that struggle. But I mean, he is a guy that I think is going to be an engine. He's going to be a multi-year all-star. So it's definitely not a knock on Scoot that he is number 3. I just think that we as in the media were a little quick to label him generational. And also I feel like, what motivation did he really have in a sense? Like, he knew he was going top 2, no chance to really move up. I like the G League, but there's no sense of urgency in the G League in a sense. There's nothing to play for.
You think maybe there was some complacency there a little bit?
I think a little bit of it. Because if you look at like his teammates that are from the Ignite that were younger, I feel like they've really, really improved. And I feel like they were playing for their draft position to prove that they were worthy of a first-round pick. Well, I think with Brandon Miller, for example, he was, I want to say, the 9th rated player in his high school class from ESPN. And then also college basketball. And again, it's not a knock on the Ignite or even Overtime Elite. But I think with college basketball, 1, you get the publicity. But 2, you're playing for, I mean, you have these built-in rivalries. You're playing in pressured situations. Like if you're a Kansas player, you're playing in the Big 12. You're playing on the road at Texas. If you like Brandon Miller, he played in Auburn, which is a huge rivalry. Then you have the SEC tournament, NCAA tournament. So you have these games where they're very intense, and you can see how guys react under pressure. And for Scoot, on one hand, the pressure is everybody is trying to, I guess, make a name for themselves going against him because they know the scouts are watching. But on the other hand, it's like you're playing in empty arenas. You just don't have the same pressure as college basketball. So I think that played a little bit of a role in his complacency.
And to be fair, maybe one of the few games where we did get to see Scoot Henderson kind of play up to the level of some competitions was in the exhibition game against Wemby, right? Because there were stakes on that game. He was coming out with a point to try and prove, to maybe see if he could tilt the odds in his favor of going number 1, and it didn't really work out. But that was at least a fun little exhibition match to see those two guys go head to head. Now, at this point, though, so Scoot Henderson's going to be sitting out the remaining 5 or 6 games that the Ignite had the rest of this season. They don't really have a shot for the G League playoffs. I mean, is it a mistake for Scoot to sit the rest of the season while Miller can kind of continue to increase his stock in the tournament?
It just depends on how you look at it. From an evaluation standpoint, if I'm a team, I want to see him play. I want to see him finish out the season. I know me personally, I've tried to watch him play 5 times this year, and I've only been able to catch him live the 1 game against Wembanyama, the first game in Vegas. The second game, he played like a minute or 2 before he got hurt. So I've missed plenty of opportunities to evaluate him live. He came to Dallas twice to play the Texas Legends, and I missed those games. From Scoot's perspective and from a representative, like if I were his agent, it does make sense. You don't want him to get hurt. It's meaningless games. G League can get a little sloppy towards the end. It's almost same as the NBA. It can get sloppy in late March, and teams are playing guys that are basically fighting for their careers. You don't want somebody overzealous and diving for a loose ball because they're trying to fight for a roster spot next year, trying to hurt them. So I see it from both sides of the fence. At the very lowest he can go is number 3. I still think he probably ends up going number 2, but it does make sense to protect the stock from a little bit.
Okay, one more thing before we let you go here. We can't get you out of here without running at least one tankathon spin and having you do some selections for us. You mentioned the Pistons as one of those teams where if they were at number 2, that maybe it doesn't make sense for them to take Scoot Henderson. I think there's a couple of those types of teams, right? I mean, you got the Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton, you got the Hornets with LaMelo Ball. I think there are a handful of teams that it might not make perfect sense for them to take Scoot Henderson number 2. So if you're with it, let me hit the wheel and we'll see where these odds come out at. Oh, okay, tough roll for my Houston Rockets, but we've got. We'll just do the top 5. We'll keep it easy. We got San Antonio number 1, Detroit number 2, Orlando number 3, Houston number 4, Charlotte number 5. Who's going where?
Who? All right. So San Antonio number 1.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Wembanyama.
There we go.
Who was 2? Detroit.
Detroit.
I would go Brandon Miller.
Okay.
Who was 3?
Orlando.
Oh man, I just think it's a lot of redundancy. No matter where you go in Orlando, they're not going to pass up Scoot Henderson. Fultz has been playing well. Yeah, I mean, you got to go with Scoot, but whoever goes there, it's a possible logjam. And then 4 was
my Houston Rockets.
You got to go with Amin Thompson.
There we go. I was thinking Amin, but I wanted the expert to make the pick. All right, I'm glad we're on the same page here. And then lastly, we got the Charlotte Hornets, number 5. Where are you going?
If I'm Charlotte, I would probably go with. I'd swing for the fences. I'd go with Ausar Thompson.
All right, well, there you have it. A quick tankathon spin with a mock top 5 picks. With that, who ultimately goes number 2 overall in this year's NBA draft? Will it still be Scoot Henderson, or will Brandon Miller jump over, leapfrog him, if you will, and take that number 2 spot? Who else surprises and maybe jumps up the ranks on people's boards going into the NBA draft? Of course, you'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On NBA Big Board. Rafael, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime. Reach out, let me know, and we can make it happen.